Welcome. Give us a second to catch up over here. And we're live over on YouTube. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Causey's Classics, brought to you by Black Hat Comics and Rockin' Milpitas, your one-stop shop for all things superhero. Shop online at black-cat-comics.com. Here at Black Cat Comics and Rockin' Milpitas, we talk a lot about the new books. If you watch the Wednesday video, if you tune into Comic Shop Talk Live on Saturday, we talk a lot of new comics. And so Causey's Classics gives us an opportunity to go old school and talk about some old books, talk about some classic stuff, talk about some different eras and creators and great stuff from eras gone by. So thanks for joining us. This is interactive. Feel free to throw your Q&A out there as we talk about all things old school comics. If you're watching live, then go open another window, go to black-cat-comics.com, click on shop, click on Causey's Classics, and just hang out with that. We're going to talk about a few books, and when I say make it live, you'll see that book show up, and you can purchase that book, and we'll go on to the next book. Make sure if you want that book that you go through the whole process. If you put it in your cart and Bob puts it in his cart and Bob checks out, he'll get the book and you'll miss out. So if you really want the book we're talking about, go ahead and make the purchase and book your curbside, or we'll ship it out to you, whatever you like. So I think that covers the specifics. Let's go ahead and get started. This week, I thought it would be fun to talk about some 90s comics. The 90s books are kind of getting into their own. The folks who were kids in the 90s are just kind of getting to that age where they have cool jobs and disposable income, and so they're looking to pick up some of the classics they had when they were kids and when they had back in the day, just like we did back in the day. So like I say, 90s books are just kind of hitting their stride. It's an era that I've always appreciated. I've always talked about for a long time. 90s comics get kind of bashed because of this or that, the foil covers and everything. But every era has its great books. Every era has its excellent titles, excellent creators. So I pulled a few, some of my favorite books. This show isn't necessarily about selling keys. It isn't necessarily about, hot books. It's just about talking all things comics, all things old school. So I got some of my favorites, some good examples of great 90s books, and we're going to have some fun. So let's get started. I always like to start with Batman because everybody loves Batman. And of course, the whole Bane thing was a big part of 90s comics. Batman is a part of every single era. But this little gem, this is a Black Cat pack. This is all 3 issues bundled together for you of Batman versus Predator 1 through 3. It's one of the early publisher mashups between DC Comics and Dark Horse Comics. It is a cult classic, not just with the Batman people or with the Predator people, but just with comic people in general. It's an early Dark Horse book. If you watch my Wednesday video, I talk all the time about the great job Dark Horse has done with Alien and Predator and all their cool franchise comics. And this was a gem back in the day, and it was kind of hard to find. It's still sort of hard to find. So I bundled all 3 of them here together for you. Great stuff. And of course, you may or may not know that Predator is now going to be a Marvel comic because Disney has acquired all the cool 20th Century Fox stuff, which brings Alien and Predator over to Marvel. So having a DC Dark Horse Predator book is kind of now getting cooler than ever. So if you go back to the 90s like I do, you're going to remember and love a lot of the books that I'm talking about tonight. If you don't go back to the 90s like I do, you're going to acknowledge pretty quickly that these are some sweet books and books that you're going to want to have in your stash. Batman versus Predator 1 through 3 definitely makes that cut, and $20 is a great price for this pack. There was a sequel to this. But like I say, the book's kind of hard to find in original format, kind of hard to find in trade paperback. The trade's been out of print for a long time. As this all now goes to Marvel, it's not coming back to print. So like I say, this is a book that's just going to get more and more scarce, and it's tons of fun. Great stories, great art. I love me some sci-fi. You love some Batman. So let's go ahead and make it live and send this cool Black Cat pack home with somebody. Batman versus Predator 1 through 3, early 90s classic. Like I say, if you go back to those days like I do, you remember this one, and you probably lost your copy or don't know where it is. So $20 to get all three of them is pretty sweet. Like I say, I always like to start with something Batman because everybody likes Batman. Moving on to this little gem, this little beauty. This was in our newsletter either this week or last week, but I wanted to give it some extra attention because for some reason it's still here. As I say, this little jaunt through the 90s is just going to show you some of my favorite titles, and Astro City is one of my favorite titles. One of the best books of the 90s, no doubt about it. Kurt Busiek, Brent Anderson, beautiful Alex Ross covers. Can't say enough about everything about this title. Again, one of the very best books of the 90s, one of the very best superhero books out there. Anybody that is familiar with Kurt Busiek knows he's awesome. It's sort of like, you know, what it's really like to live in Metropolis, what it would be really like to live in the Marvel Comics New York City, in Gotham City, like to be a regular person in a comic book world. It takes some of those sort of standards and tropes that you know from all the superhero comics, but gives them a sort of gravitas angle that makes it really fun to read. Excellent characterization. Just can't say enough about the different characters, different arcs. And this is the first issue of Volume 1. This is the place to begin. It is gone. This was back in the day an Image comic. It's now a DC comic. When and if we'll get a new round of Astro City. But like I said, I love this title. And over the years, it's kind of gone by the wayside, I think. Kind of doesn't get the credit it deserves. So I'm doing my part to bring it back and get some Astro City out there. Everything from Kurt Busiek is awesome. Everything Brent Anderson. You're probably reading the reprint of God Loves Man Kills right now. Anything with an Alex Ross cover. This guy is $20. It's in really sweet condition. Like I say, first issue of the first volume, Astro City. Great 90s book. If you don't know much about Astro City, this is a great place to start. If you do know much about Astro City, you're going to want to pick this up because much like that Batman Predator, it's only going to become more rare, only going to become more scarce. Love me some Astro City. Might not be the kind of thing they turn into a Netflix show because I just don't know how you'd translate that to live action. But great stuff. So let's go ahead and make it live. Astro City #1.
And we're live.
Like I say, go to black-cat-comics.com, click on shop, click on Causey's Classics, and you'll see the books pop up as soon as I say make it live. And if you need it to go home and join your collection, pick it up because they go fast. Love me some Astro City. And more on some Image comics later, but I want to get to one of my other favorite things about the 90s, and that's Valiant comics. Love me some modern Valiant comics, and I loved the classic Valiants back in the day. This is Magnus Robot Fighter #1. This guy and his original creator have a long history in comics. Magnus was a gold key character, much like Solar Man of the Atom, Turok Son of Stone, some of the other 90s Valiant guys. But Magnus was really cool, and Magnus Robot Fighter and original Valiant really brought comics back to their core, back to what made 50s comics awesome, back to what made 60s comics awesome. A little more simplistic story, but not like in a dumbed down or for kids kind of way, but just in a sort of pure sort of way. Magnus Robot Fighter is classic science fiction. And great stories, great art. Like I say, the Gold Key books were really great. Back in the day in the 90s, I was super stoked to see them bring back those Gold Keys characters in modern comics and modern versions. If you were around in the 90s and you were like me, maybe you weren't so enamored with your favorite title at the time. You know I love the Avengers. You know I love Captain America, but my Marvels just weren't doing it for me. So I said to my comic book guy, hey, find me something that I'm going to want to read. And he handed me Magnus Robot Fighter and Solar Man of the Atom. And I'll be honest with you, let's face it, it's a guy in a tunic. So I was like, really, dude? Magnus Robot Fighter? And he was like, no, trust me. Take it home, read it. You're going to want the next issue. And he was 200% right. Great stories, great art. And it sent me, into the whole Valiant universe. And there's a reason they were able to bring all of this stuff back. because the core characters are great, and it always works for new generations and for folks who love the classic sci-fi. So this Robot Fighter #1, one of the original 90s Valiant books, one of the things that kicked off the whole Valiant universe extravaganza. This guy runs $25. It's a really nice copy. It's a great price for that book. Like I say, if you don't know much about 90s Valiant stuff, you are going to want to pick this up, and it will send you on a lifetime of adventure. So let's make it live for Magnus Robot Fighter #1.
And we're live.
Like I say, one of the original Valiant books. Start your Valiant collection with this guy, and you will not be disappointed. I wanted to mention Magnus 1 because it's my segue to Magnus 5. And you're asking yourself, Cause, what's with all the Magnus Robot Fighter? Well, I'll tell you. Magnus Robot Fighter #5 is one of my favorite things in comics, called a split book, or in this case, a flip book. So here's your Magnus Robot Fighter #5, the new issue, first part of the new story. Okay, great. I've read the first 4 and I love Magnus. I'm going to keep going. But wait, I flip it over and here's Rye #1. Wow, Rye #1, one of the great comics of the 90s. First appearance of Rye. All kinds of greatness going on in here. One of the more popular current Valiant books, I should say, which is a big part of why I wanted to mention it. One of the books I'll talk about a little bit later will underscore a lot of this. But Rye is really great. Like Magnus Robot Fighter, Rye is really cool science fiction, takes place in the future. It's the future of Japan. Rye is the defender of Japan and the defender of the world. It was a great story back in the day. It's a great series now. Love me some Rye and love me some flip books because they are what they say they are. Like I say, you're reading along, and when you get done with your Magnus story, you just flip it and start your Rye story. Great stuff. I should have mentioned the issue 1 and this issue 5 do have the card and do have the coupon. 90s comics loved inserts. This one was not bagged. They just stuck the card on the inside. Really hard, as it has always been, to find comics that still have the cards, still have the coupons. So there's 58 reasons you want to pick up Magnus Robot Fighter #5 because it's an awesome Magnus comic. It's an awesome Rye comic. And this issue still has the coupon and still has the cards that you can take. Really, really awesome stuff. For the record, Magnus Robot Fighter #4 came with a Rye card. So the strictest first appearance of Rye is on the card that comes with Magnus 4. And then he first appears in the comics in your Rye #1 that is the flip book to Magnus 5. So let's go ahead and make Magnus 5 live. Let's make it live.
And we're live.
You want to pick up Magnus 1, this book is awesome, and it will make you want to read all of them. If you won't take my word for it, pick up Magnus 5. You'll read it. You'll think it's awesome. You'll go back and pick up #1, and you'll love all that Rye stuff. So why am I talking about all this? Why? Because I'm really getting to this guy, Rye #0. Rye #0 is one of the books of the 90s, and one of the reasons I'm mentioning all of this right now is this is your first appearance of Bloodshot. Yes, you may or may not have seen the Bloodshot movie because you may or may not be watching movies. It didn't get into the theaters and all that good stuff. But Vin Diesel is the first Valiant character to hit the big screen. They're already talking about Shadow Man and Exo and all that good stuff. So this is the origin of Rye, the first appearance and origin of Bloodshot. This is a huge crux to the backbone of the 90s Valiant universe. This will be presumably a backbone of their cinematic universe going forward. Like I say, this was one of the real gems back in the day. Very, very hard book to find. Still a hard book to find. Even if you get online, a lot of the comic shops don't have one. If they do have one, they're not really selling it. There's a lot of speculation going on with Valiant books. A lot of speculation, of course, going on with Rye and Bloodshot. And again, as I said, Shadow Man, Exo, all the kind of things that you read about here in Rye #0. Again, one of the more rare books that is out there. This one's $50. It's a great price for this book. I think I paid like 35 for mine like 25 years ago. I know, this isn't Batman, this isn't Marvel DC, but 90s Valiant stuff is so great and so overlooked in the big scheme of 90s books and in the big scheme of comics. Some of the best creators were doing Valiant books at the time. Frank Miller, Walt Simonson. A lot of this stuff is Jim Shooter and David Latham, and which reminds me, actually, this book has art by David Latham, who is the guy doing this week's issue of Stray Bullets. Stray Bullets is another great 90s book, and I really, really wish I had an extra copy, first print of Stray Bullets to show to you guys. But I wanted to make a little segue between Jim Shooter, David Latham doing Stray Bullets. Rye number 0, great, great book. So Magnus 5, the first appearance of Rye, and Rye number 1. And then Rye number 0, because 0 issues were really big back in the 90s. Everybody loved those 0 issues back in the day. And this was a huge, huge one. So again, if you don't know too much about 90s Valiant Universe, you got to have this book. If you do know a lot about the 90s Valiant Universe, you probably wanted a copy of this book for about 20 years, and here's your opportunity to grab one. So make it live with Rye number 0.
And we're live.
Rye number 0. Great stuff. And, well, I've been talking a little bit of the obscure 90s, a little bit of my personal favorite 90s. Again, I don't have a Stray Bullets to show you. I don't have a Hellboy to show you. Hellboy is, again, easily one of my favorite books of the 90s, but that Next Men first appearance is a little tough to dig up. But, let's bust out a fan favorite. Let's do some Spawn number 1. You know what this one is. Maybe you don't have a copy anymore. Maybe you sold yours already. Maybe you kind of want one back. Maybe you were a kid back in the 90s and you never did grab a number 1. Maybe you just need a really nice copy because this is a really nice copy. But here's Spawn number 1. This is easily and inarguably the book of the 90s. I think it came out in 92. Big part of the Image Comics launch. It is still this week. Number 309 came out. So if you're a Spawn person and you picked up 309 this week, you can go all the way back to the beginning. Or if you don't know much about Spawn, you can pick up the original issue from 92, and you can grab number 309, this week's issue. And I guess that sort of speaks for itself. There's a reason any book runs 300 issues, and that's great stories, great art. And like I say, one of my favorite books of the 90s, probably one of your favorite books of the 90s, certainly one of the most famous books of the 90s. And again, something I've talked about for a long time, it's there was a time when everybody had one, and there was a time when there was a lot of talk about this book, and oh, you can find that book everywhere. But like any great book, as the time goes by, those issues get bought up, those copies get bought up. This book isn't terribly hard to find, but it's hard to find an affordable copy. It's maybe hard to find a really nice copy. People are sort of hoarding them in anticipation of the new movie and all that kind of stuff. There's this one. There's number 9. There's, of course, several keys in the series, but you can never go wrong picking up the first one. I've got this one for $50. It's a really nice copy. Like I say, maybe you sold yours already. Maybe you don't know where it is in your hundreds of boxes of comics like my stash. So here's one that you can pick up curbside or have shipped out to you. Let's make it live. Spawn number 1.
And we're live.
Get ready for the upcoming film, or just kick back and read some cool, creepy, dark superhero stuff. Everybody loves some Spawn. Quick anecdote while I'm on there is Max. This isn't one that we're going to put up live, but this is a quick opportunity to talk about another one of the greatest books of the 90s, and a really quick opportunity to say, if you love the old school books, when you go to the website and you check out the old school books, we don't have I haven't had time to put every single book that we have up on the site. So book a virtual shopper experience and ask me what other books we have. Like, a lot of the ones that are on the back wall might not be up on the site. We've got a lot of books lying around that might not be up on the site. So if you like the old school books, book a virtual shopping experience, and let's talk some old comics one-on-one, because it's tons of fun. While I was on the subject of 90s, I had to mention the Max. I had to mention Sam Keith. Had to give a shout out to my friend Matt and one of our favorite books. one of the best books of the 90s. If you don't believe me, check out the animated series. When you watch the animated series and it blows your mind, you're going to want to read the book. So book a virtual appointment and pick up that Max. So there you have it. That's my brief trip through the 1990s. It was a great time. Like I say, people make fun of the foily covers and all the different things, 13 covers of Gen 13, but it was a good time for comics. It was a good time for new creators. It was a good time for classic creators still doing great work. And we got all kinds of comics. So just to briefly go back through, yes?
What's the grade of the Spawn? Is it a 9.4? Farhan wants to know.
Is it a 9.4? I don't really like to get that specific. Let's see what she is. Probably not a 9.4. Got a couple of cracks in the spine. Maybe if you can, how close can I get there?
He's over here.
You can see just a little wear on the spine there. Kurt Busiek, Brent Anderson, another one of my favorite books of the 90s. A triumvirate of Valiant greatness, Magnus 1, kicking off the Valiant era. Magnus 5 is your ride number 1 flip book, and then ride number 0, because it's awesome, and that's your first appearance of Bloodshot. And then, of course, Spawn number 1, the book of the 90s. Fun stuff. So as I wrap up in the last few minutes, like I say, this is interactive Q&A. You want to throw something out there about your favorite 90s books, or something that from the 90s era you might be looking for. As I say, I wish I had a Stray Bullets to show you, a Hellboy first appearance from Next Men. That was great stuff. And like I say, if you go back to those days like I do, go revisit some of that stuff. The 90s had great stuff. If you don't go back that far, then you got a lot of homework to do, because there's lots and lots of great books from that era, lots of fun stuff to check out. Questions, comments, concerns, and queries? Well, all right, then we'll wrap it up. I hope you enjoyed my little time travel trip to comics of the 1990s. We'll probably do this again the last Friday of next month. Until then, tune in tomorrow for Comic Shop Talk Live as we come back to the present and discuss a lot of the newer books like Three Jokers. And then tune in Sunday for Matchbox versus Hot Wheels. And then it's back next Wednesday for next week's round of new books. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.